How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. I make music as AfroDJMac. I'm an Ableton certified trainer, and I do a lot of work at my website, AfroDJMac.com. The most recent thing I just released was a set of flute instruments for Ableton Live, 7 different flute instruments. Some of them are very flute-like, and some of them are a little more experimental. There's pads, chords, sounds, pretty cool leads. One sounds kind of like an electric guitar. And I was able to get all these interesting sounds because the flute samples came from Rosalind McPhail, who is a great flutist or flautist, or I prefer to just say flute player because I'm not exactly sure the best way to say that. But she's let me have access to some of her stems of her heavily affected flute tracks. And I made some pretty cool instruments that are free to download at AfroDJMac.com. So check that out if you're so interested in having some sounds you will find nowhere else. On today's show, I want to read an essay I wrote for the site patches.zone. I spoke with Patches on the Music Production Podcast about a year ago now, and it was probably a year, maybe two, that I wrote this manifesto, and it's about the book On the Origin, or the piece is called On, but the book is called Origin of Inspiration, 7 Short Essays for Creative People, and it's by the artist Samuel Adoquei. Not 100% sure if that pronunciation's right, Adoquei, but the last name is spelled Adoquei. And it's an incredible book. He's a painter, and a lot of what he says about his work is really just for any creative person. So it's kind of cool how we see this overlap in all the different arts and creativity and inspiration. And I found the book really inspiring, really helpful, helped me think about different ways of approaching work that I do, and not even just in music, but it's really a great read. And I wrote this manifesto for patches.zone. It's on patches.zone. You can click under Learn and then Manifestos, and it's there. I'll post a link in the show notes, as I will to the book, of course. So I'll read this to you now, and I hope you enjoy it. On the Origin of Inspiration. We all know how precious inspiration is. It sneaks into our lives from out of nowhere. We can never really know what triggers it. Maybe it's a song or words from a friend, but sometimes those songs or words do nothing to conjure up the spirit of inspiration. So, it all depends on when a trigger finds you. It's a sort of alignment of the planets. Things come together just right and bam, inspiration hits you. Being inspired is like holding water in your hands. You can keep it there for a few moments, but if you wait too long, it slips through your fingers. That's why you must act on it immediately. I read an interview with Neil Young in which he says that he drops everything when an idea comes to him. Some of his best-known songs arrived in a passing moment. It's a sort of respect for the inspiration. You must honor it when it arrives, because it might not ever come back. In my almost never-ending search for inspiration, I have a few go-to places that tend to yield good results. Taking a walk, listening to new music, being in nature, conversations with close friends, and exercise are all activities with a pretty strong inspiration-yielding track record. One of my favorite things to do is to read. Reading is nice because the words stay there. They don't change. In order to read, you have to stop everything else. It's an exercise in focusing and concentration. You must be in the moment. And those are important abilities a person needs to create music. Often when I read, the environment I'm reading in becomes part of the experience too. So I will often try to combine a good book with an inspiring environment. This summer, I read Origin of Inspiration by Samuel Adoquei. Most of my reading was done outside during a few hot afternoons. I picked this book because it came highly recommended from an artist whose work I admire, Julian Casablancas, the lead singer of The Strokes. And perhaps this leads us to the first lesson. Think of people that have inspired you in some way and find out what inspired them. Just as you might look at the musical influence of an artist that influences you, also look to their creative and philosophical influences. Casablancas wrote the foreword to Origin of Inspiration, so I knew that there was certainly something of value in this book. I really believe in the importance of having a plan. When I go to create music, I'm faced with countless choices. There are probably 10,000 kick drum samples, 100 virtual instruments that each have hundreds of presets, unlimited tracks, a collection of hardware synths, guitars, drums, etc. I need to have a plan or else I wind up spending hours choosing between all of my options. Back in my early days, I had a guitar, microphone, and tape recorder. I never lost much time deciding on gear, and as a result, I got a lot done. Today, it is easy to spend an afternoon looking for the perfect snare drum sample. So, making decisions beforehand is pretty much essential. But what happens when things don't go according to plan? Adoquei writes about finding opportunity in the detours. Rather than harp on a problem when it arises, use it as a chance to try something new. After all, there's no better way to end creativity than with frustration. So, avoid frustration altogether. Change course and see where it takes you. I love this way of thinking because it allows a project to take on a life of its own. It has helped me learn to allow outside influences, situations, and problems to become part of the work instead of becoming hindrances. We can use this to learn to go with the flow and be flexible. Even tall skyscrapers and great oak trees bend and sway with the wind. Otherwise, they would collapse. This concept is taken one step further in Origin of Inspiration. Adoquei advocates taking what he calls intentional detours. If we never take detours in life, we will never expose ourselves to new stimuli. That's a perfect recipe for becoming stale, boring, and predictable. Purposely go out of your way to do something different, especially when confronted with a lack of inspiration. When we are in familiar situations, we tend to filter out much of what we see and hear. How often have you taken the same road to work and never noticed a particular shop on the side of the road? Yet, when we take a new way, we are more likely to observe our surroundings. I find that when I return to my normal routine, it often looks different. I see things I never noticed before. In this way, taking one intentional detour actually pays off twice. First, with our new experiences, and then again when we return to our original experiences with new eyes. When you are low on inspiration, do something different. Even try doing your work in a different place. It's amazing what can happen even if you decide to move from your normal workspace to bringing a portable rig outside on a sunny day, for example. Perhaps those chirping birds, which would normally be considered noise and problematic, will become an interesting element to the acoustic guitar track you are recording. Much to the chagrin of the fantasy world I often live in, no progress will ever be made without putting in the hard work. Learn this now and never forget it. You'll need to work hard, and you'll need to do it consistently. Whether you feel like it or not, you've got to show up and put in the work. This is easy when inspiration is high, but extremely difficult when it is low. The creative arts have this almost mystical air surrounding it, as if it happens by magic. And it's this myth that allows artists to feel justified in not working when they feel uninspired. Wipe this from your mind. Creative work gets done through hard work, and creative work might be the most difficult work there is. There's no step-by-step manual. You just have to do the work. And that brings us to the last lesson I'd like to discuss from Origin of Inspiration, the no-be, or no one else but you attitude. We all have challenges and problems. We all have difficult lives. Of course, this is relative. Some of us may objectively have it worse than others, but our own personal problems are serious and real to us as an individual. What we have to learn to do is navigate through them ourselves. Adoquei speaks about the no one else but you attitude. He writes, "Who will provide continuous motivation for meeting your responsibilities and focusing on the important things? Who will regularly check your tanks so your engine does not run out of fuel in the middle of nowhere? When your ego, pride, and ambition are being harassed, who will remind you to stay calm and focus on the bigger picture?" To which he answers, no one else but you. Excuses are easy to find, and playing victim feels justifiable. But by accepting that no one else but you has the power to overcome your challenges is incredibly empowering. Perhaps you may need the help of others, but it is up to you to seek it out. I've found the nobody else but you attitude to be essential in my work. When I convince myself something is out of my power, I tend to shut down. The worst part is that I feel justified in doing so. But the no one else but you attitude helps me feel capable of getting past problems. And that capability fills me with inspiration. It has taught me to become creative in my problem solving. Remember that it is up to you and only you to create your path in life. If you really want it, you will find a way. If you don't really want it, you will find an excuse. There's so much more to gain from Origin of Inspiration. I certainly recommend it. To summarize, here are 3 important lessons I've taken from the book. 1. Look to the people who inspire you and find out who or what inspired them. 2. Embrace the detours in life and seek them out intentionally when inspiration is low. 3. Follow the no one else but you attitude. Of course, it is difficult to follow these ideas all the time, but do your best. Beating yourself up about any failures is not going to improve your situation. Pick yourself up and reflect on what went wrong, and think of ways to keep on track. As much as I try to look for ways to stay inspired and motivated, I more often than I'd like to admit find myself struggling with it. That's where discipline comes in. Keep pushing, keep fighting. The inspiration might not be there when you begin, but it will often show up once you get working. And that's the end of the essay. I hope you enjoyed that. Patches.zone, which is one of the coolest sites if you're into music production, especially with Ableton Live. Patches has some pretty cool manifestos by some very interesting people, including, say, Ethan Hine, who was on the podcast as well a couple of weeks back now. Ethan Hine is really a great thinker in the world of music technology and education of music. It was a pleasure to talk to him, and his own manifesto, which is called The Morality of Sampling, is very exciting to read too. So I hope you enjoyed this. Definitely check out patches.zone and definitely check out Origin of Inspiration by Samuel Adoquei. Again, I hope I got the pronunciation right, but it's a great book and it's short. It's divided into 7 parts, which is kind of nice too. It's really digestible. I really got a lot out of it, and kind of revisiting this essay has made me remember some of those things that was so inspiring about it. I'm going to also put some show notes in this episode, including this documentary called The Unseen Beauty, which was really just following Sam Adoquei as he created some art, but he's talking throughout the whole thing, and he's got just some great wisdom and insight just about how he's matured as a painter and as an artist. And I think it really applies nicely to music and any creative endeavor, honestly. So thanks again for listening to the Music Production Podcast. I'm Brian Funk, your host. Check out my work at AfroDJMac.com, and definitely check out Origin of Inspiration by Samuel Adoquei. Thanks and have a great day.